as a group. They weren't mean about it, they weren't aggressive. They just said, look, if Canada Post is committed to make it safe, make it home, which includes mental health in the workplace, and if they're committed to upholding their code of conduct, we expect a certain level of respect and professionalism from the people that are managing us. And the superintendent, Fatty, denied it. He's like, I've never heard about this before. So the 9 people, one after the other, were like, hey, here's where we came to you as individuals and gave you our concerns, and you didn't do anything about it. One after the other, after the other, after the other. By the end, he relented. He was like, okay, clearly this is a problem. Is this impacting everybody? The whole group said yes. And we're not going to pretend that this is going to change the supervisor's behavior, but it did put the fear in that supervisor. They didn't change as a person, but their behavior changed. So I've been checking in with the RSMCs for the past week, and they said he's been as sweet as pie ever since. So this is sort of an example where if we try and confront a problem as an individual, we're not going to be as effective. But as a group, we can have a lot of power. And I know that downtown depot here, there are a lot of people that took the course and are willing to help their coworkers in trying to push back if something bad does happen in the depot. So if anything does, hopefully nothing does pop up, but if it does, we have people in place to be able to make good and make change. On that note, some of you might be wondering about the Depot 2 restructure. So what we knew going into the Depot 2 restructure is that they were planning to pull a Delton on it. And pulling a Delton means the company says that over 6 years, Delton didn't gain parcel volume, they lost 200% in parcel volume. And then they cut 9 full-time routes, where in actuality, they gained about 200% over that time. So they should have been gaining positions. So going into Depot 2, we knew we couldn't rely on Canada Post. We knew we couldn't rely on the collective agreement because there is no language in the collective agreement to protect us from Canada Post shifting the numbers around. And whenever we go into negotiation to try and fix the collective agreement to address restructures, they legislate us back to work. So Depot 2, we circulated that citywide petition where we got about 800 out of a possible 950 carriers. That petition went all the way up to the CPC CEO, and as a result, instead of 8 routes getting cut there, because of the pressure, and this is the route measurement team saying this themselves, they couldn't have done this on their own, only 3 positions were cut. Now, in a way this is a victory, but in another way this is still unacceptable. This is unacceptable because the Depot 2 workers should have been gaining 3 routes instead of losing 3. And for anyone that's going to be facing restructures in the future, Rosedale's up, Whitemud is going through it right now, Rosedale in January, Mayfield in February, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be scheduled for later on in 2020. Sorry?
There's rumors about us going through one next year.
Yeah. So I haven't received any official word, but it comes for all of us. So Depot 2, they said this is unacceptable. We had a citywide mass meeting, about 110, 120 members showed up to discuss how we're going to fight this. Depot 2 wanted to do a mass flyer boycott. They wanted to do mass personal days. They wanted to refuse to bid. They were even discussing doing a wildcat strike. The problem is, currently, we are under back to work legislation, which is the main reason I'm here today. Now, what that means is when we were legislated back to work, despite the fact that when Harper did it to us in 2011, it was deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, Trudeau does it again. While we're under this legislation, if we engage in any job action, it will mean every member involved in that job action is fined $1,000 a day. And it means that a union official like myself would be fined $50,000 a day. So Depot 2 said, we know this law is bullcrap, but we can't fight it by ourselves. So what they wanted me to do is go around and basically hold an informal referendum asking people's opinion. Now, the reason this is important, and this is one of the criticisms I had of National during the strike, is that they based their strategy on the assumption that we wouldn't be legislated back to work, despite the fact that most members knew we would be legislated back to work. And so when I was on the phone with National, when Depot 2 wanted to fight, I called National. I'm like, what are you willing to do to support us if Depot 2 wants to fight? And they said, we can't do anything. I'm like, well, first off, you're choosing not to do anything. And second off, have you bothered asking members what they feel? They said, well, no. So this is what we're doing, right? It's very well-intentioned, but still worthy of criticism, that they're kind of afraid to ask members how they feel about the legislation because it shines a light on the lack of leadership in the union. So essentially what we're doing is going around, it's a very simple yes or no ballot. The question is, if you knew you had the financial backing of the National Union and other unions, because remember, other unions did pledge millions of dollars to us if we were willing to test those fines. If you knew you had the financial backing of this union as well as other unions, and you knew you had the support, like mass majority support of the Edmonton local, would you be willing to join us in defying the back to work legislation? Now, just to frame this, there is no right or wrong answer, right? So it's just a matter of, it's basically an opinion poll, because if National's saying, well, members don't want to do this, it's like, well, we're asking members. And if members come back with a resounding, yes, we want to do this, that gives us an opportunity to put pressure on National and other locals to be like, look, Edmonton wants to fight, what are you willing to do to join us? So a yes vote doesn't commit us to any course of action at this point. It just gives us an opportunity to promote a new strategy and see where we could get support from other unions and our own national. And it's an important thing too to frame it as if you knew you had the support of the rest of the local, because this isn't about one depot going out on their own or one section. It's about a whole local supporting each other, right? So again, just to reiterate that question, if you knew you had the financial and legal support of our national union and the financial support of other unions, and you knew you had the backing of, mass majority backing of the rest of our local, would you be willing to support our local testing the back to work, defying the back to work legislation? So again, no wrong answer. The results of, one second sisters, so the results of this poll will be published in our newsletter. It will be broken down by station, station and wave. And based on the results, like example, yes comes back, then we start having more meetings to discuss, okay, how do we build more support for us to actually fight to improve our working conditions? Because the problem that Depot 2 faced is that they're going against an unjust restructure program. But when they try and fight it, the legislation is hanging over them. The other problem we always face is that people ask me all the time, what's going on with arbitration? So the reality with arbitration, the government extended it to December. The reason they're doing that is because they don't want it up during the election. They don't want that drama during the election. The company is thrilled because there's a possibility the Conservatives will be elected. And we know there's a good historical precedent of Conservatives canceling arbitration and imposing contract. So anyone in this room that's unfortunate enough to be on the second tier wage, that's a result of the 2011 imposed contract. We never negotiated that. We never agreed to it. That was unconstitutionally imposed on us. And then when we complained about it, the court system said, well, we just slapped them on the wrist. And then history has been our teacher as far as what that means. So what we do know is that we can't count on the courts, we can't count on labor law, we can't count on our own collective agreement. So what can we count on? We could count on our members, but we can't build a strategy on what our members feel unless we actually ask how they feel. So if the vote comes back no, that's fine. No shame on anyone voting no. It's just, it sends a message that we can't build our strategy around pushing back against the back to work legislation. We will have to wait until the arbitration is done, whenever that is, right? But the reality is, even when the arbitration is done and we decide to fight, guess what's waiting for us? Anyone? Back to work legislation.
Yeah.
We've been legislated 5 times since 1985. Very quick history on that. 1981, our union was fighting for equal hiring standards and equal wages and equal hours for sisters in the federal sector, because at that time women were basically kept from working full-time jobs. They were mostly part-time, limited hours. They also were fighting for maternity leave for Canadians. So during that strike, we were legislated back to work by Trudeau Sr., and we defied the legislation. Some of our executive was thrown in jail for treason. So as they sat in jail for 2 months and refused to break the strike, our movement galvanized, the labor movement galvanized, and we ended up winning all of those demands for our members, and we established maternity leave as a standard for all Canadians. So that's an example of how the labor movement, when it gets its act together, could actually fight not only to better our cause, but help all of Canadians. So Trudeau was so embarrassed by this that they changed the law in 1985 from jail to fines. And so what we're at now, is that no one's tested this legislation. So basically, my mandate is trying to organize the floor, is trying to see if members have the appetite to challenge something like this. So one last time, if you knew you had the financial and legal support of our national union, financial support of other unions, you knew you had the support of other members in our local, would you be willing to defy the legislation? So any questions about the vote? Christine.
I was just wondering what some of the numbers coming out of other depots have been.
So I'm trying not to share the numbers because I want people's true feelings.